Every day that goes by, I feel the weight of all the things I've accumulated, thinking they would bring me happiness. 15 pairs of shoes in the closet, and I always wear the same 3. Drawers that barely close, overstuffed cabinets, and that constant feeling of losing control of my own home. Do you recognize this reality? For years I woke up with the same dread. I would open my eyes, and the first thing I saw was a pile of clothes on the chair. The closet was full, yet I had nothing to wear. The feeling of suffocating among so many objects that should bring comfort, but only brought more work and worry. This restlessness accompanied me even when I was trying to sleep, as my eyes scanned the room and found not a single space that radiated true tranquility. Guilt consumed me. How did I let it get to this point? Why was it so difficult to keep everything organized? That's when I discovered that simplicity is not just a decorative style, but a life philosophy deeply rooted in Japanese culture. We don't need dozens of objects competing for our attention. We need space to breathe, to think, to simply exist. Today, when someone steps into my home for the first time, the reaction is always the same. How do you manage to keep everything so organized with such a busy life? The truth is that now I spend less time tidying up and more time living. The transformation was so profound that it changed not only my spaces, but also my mind. The journey began with a simple question. What do I really need to be happy? Not what society says I need, not what advertisements insist I should have, but what truly brings meaning to my life. And today, I'm going to share with you the principles that transformed my house from a storage space into a refuge of peace. Principles that don't require you to buy expensive products or follow complicated rules. Just an honest look at what really matters. The first major lesson was understanding that each object occupies not just physical space, but also mental space. Every item in our home demands a piece of our attention, even if unconsciously. When I stepped into my room for the first time after the big transformation, it felt as though a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The free surfaces allowed my eyes to rest. The space between objects created a sense of breathing, as if the house itself could finally inhale and exhale peacefully. I realized we don't need to fill every available inch. Emptiness has its own value, its own beauty. I started to notice patterns during the moments I felt most at peace. It was always in spaces where there was a balance between functionality and simplicity. At my grandmother's house, with its few carefully selected pieces of furniture. In the corner cafe, with its light walls and only the essentials on the tables. At the home of a friend whom I always admired for the tranquility it radiated. The beauty lay in intentionality. Each object had a purpose, a meaning. Nothing was there by chance or simply because it hadn't found another place. Every item had been deliberately chosen to be part of that environment. With this awareness, I began to look at my own home with new eyes. How many objects were there just out of inertia? How many things did I keep just in case or because one day it might come in handy? And most importantly, what was the emotional cost of holding on to all these things? I decided to start with the kitchen, the heart of the home. I opened every cabinet and drawer and laid everything out on the table. The sheer amount shocked me. 6 different spatulas, 3 sets of silverware, even though I always used the same ones. Glasses of all sizes and shapes, many of which had never been used. I picked up each object in my hands and asked myself the essential questions. Do I use this regularly? Does it bring me joy? If it broke, would I miss it? Surprisingly, for most items, the answer was no. They were just taking up space, creating clutter, demanding cleaning and organization. Without providing any real benefit, it was liberating to donate what I wasn't using. I imagined those items being truly useful in another home instead of occupying space in my cabinets. I kept only what I used frequently and what I truly valued. The result was a kitchen where everything had its designated place, making meal preparation a pleasurable activity rather than a frustrating search for utensils buried at the bottom of crowded drawers. The same process was applied in all areas of the house. In the bathroom, I kept only the products that truly made a difference in my routine. I discovered that I didn't need 15 different types of creams and lotions. 2 or 3 quality products that actually worked for my skin were sufficient. In the bedroom, the transformation was even deeper. I reduced my wardrobe by half, keeping only the pieces that I really wore and that made me feel good. The result? Less time wasted deciding what to wear, fewer clothes to wash and iron, and more space to breathe. The bedside table, which used to be piled high with books I intended to read, creams, medications, notes, and a myriad of small items, now held just one book, a glass of water, and a small vase with a plant. The difference in the quality of my sleep was immediate. It was as if my mind, finally free from visual clutter, could rest completely. In the living room, I removed the excess decorative pillows that no one used, the dozens of picture frames that were just collecting dust, and the ornaments accumulated over the years. I kept only what truly meant something to me, what told our family story, what brought authentic beauty to the space. One of the most surprising discoveries was realizing how objects can carry emotions. That collection of little boxes I kept because they were a gift from my aunt, even though I never found a use for them. The expensive dress that never looked good on me, but I held on to because it represented the money spent. The special dishes used only once a year, taking up an entire cabinet. I learned to separate the object from the emotion. I realized that I can honor someone's memory without keeping an item that doesn't serve me. I can cherish past experiences without accumulating physical reminders of every moment. I can acknowledge a shopping mistake, donate the item and move on, wiser for future choices. One of the most transformative principles I learned from the Japanese philosophy of organization was the idea that every object should have a designated spot. Not just any spot, but a logical one that makes its use and return easy. When everything has its assigned space, maintaining organization becomes almost automatic. At first, I spent time observing my routine. Where did I naturally leave my keys when I got home? Where did I go first when I woke up? Which utensils did I use most often in the kitchen? Based on these observations, I created systems that respected my natural habits, rather than trying to force new behaviors. The keys found a small hook near the door, exactly where I instinctively searched for them. The most commonly used hygiene products were within reach in the bathroom. The most frequently used spices in the kitchen were placed on the front shelf, easily accessible during meal preparation. This intuitive organization drastically reduced the time spent searching for things. It eliminated the frustration of not being able to find what we need just when we're in a hurry. It created fluidity in daily movements, a harmonious dance instead of a constant hunt. Another fundamental aspect was learning to appreciate the value of empty space. In Western culture, we are conditioned to think that a filled space is a utilized space. Empty shelves seem wasteful. Walls without pictures seem incomplete. Tables without objects seem abandoned. However, empty space has its own value. It allows the eyes to rest. It creates a sense of spaciousness even in small environments. It provides flexibility for the environment to breathe and adapt to the needs of the moment. I started to appreciate the beauty of clean surfaces. A coffee table with just a vase of flowers, a shelf with a few carefully selected books, a wall with a single piece of art that I truly loved, instead of a hodgepodge of images. And the most surprising realization was how these empty spaces affected my mental state. On stressful days, returning to a visually serene environment was like a balm for my restless mind. The open spaces allowed my thoughts to expand, rather than feeling confined and suffocated. The next step was to establish simple maintenance routines. I realized that small daily actions eliminated the need for stressful big cleanings. 5 minutes making the bed first thing in the morning, washing the dishes immediately after meals, putting clothes away as soon as they came off the line. Small habits that, when incorporated into the routine, kept the house organized without requiring major efforts or large blocks of time. These routines brought a calm rhythm to my days, a cadence that made maintaining the home almost meditative. Folding clean clothes transformed from a boring chore into a moment of mindfulness. Cleaning the kitchen counter after dinner became a ritual for wrapping up the day. Small moments of care for the space that, in extension, became moments of self-care. One of the most valuable lessons I learned was the importance of intentionally bringing new items into the home. In the past, I would buy impulsively, a beautiful dress in the window, an accessory on sale, a uniquely designed pot, a recommended book, and just like that, almost without realizing it, the house would become cluttered again. I then established the principle of one in, one out. For every new item I brought home, something similar had to leave. A new book, an old one would be donated. A new blouse, an old one would leave the wardrobe. This simple balance prevented the cycle of accumulation from starting again. Even more important was developing awareness before making a purchase. I began to ask myself tough questions. Do I really need this? Do I already have something that serves the same purpose? Where exactly will this go in my home? Will this item bring real value to my life or just moments of fleeting satisfaction? More often than not, the honest answer to these questions led me to leave the store empty-handed. And surprisingly, I felt no frustration, but relief. Relief for not bringing in yet another object that would eventually just become stuff, taking up physical and mental space. Over time, my relationship with shopping changed completely. I began to prefer fewer items of better quality that would last longer and bring me more satisfaction. A good coat that would last for years instead of 3 cheap ones that would lose their shape after one season. An excellent kitchen knife instead of a mediocre set that would need to be replaced. This shift not only reduced the number of items in my home, but also minimized waste, the environmental impact of my choices, and, surprisingly, saved money in the long run. Simplicity extended beyond physical objects and reached my schedule. I realized that just as a cluttered home suffocates, an overcrowded agenda also drains vital energy. I started applying the same principles, keeping only what was essential, what truly added value, what brought authentic joy. I learned to say no to commitments that didn't resonate with me, to protect empty spaces in my calendar, moments of pause to simply be, to value unstructured time as much as I valued the empty spaces in my home. Just as a less cluttered home allowed me to easily find what I was looking for, a more spacious agenda allowed me to be truly present at each appointment, rather than constantly rushing to the next event. One fascinating aspect of the Japanese philosophy of organization is the attention to small details, those that make all the difference in the daily experience of a space. I realized it wasn't just the absence of clutter that made an environment pleasant, but the intentional presence of elements that elevated the everyday experience. A small arrangement of fresh flowers on the dining table, the texture of a soft towel in the bathroom, the gentle aroma of natural incense in the living room, the soft glow of a well-placed lamp. Small sensory pleasures that transformed routine acts into moments of appreciation. These details didn't need to be expensive or elaborate. A single flower picked from the garden, a simple candle with a pleasant scent, a special cup for afternoon tea, small rituals that brought awareness and beauty to everyday life. Another important concept was learning to embrace imperfection. In Japanese culture, there is a deep appreciation for the marks of time, for natural wear, and for the beauty of what is imperfect, incomplete, or impermanent. This freed me from the relentless pursuit of perfection, which so often paralyzed my organizing efforts. I learned to value small progress instead of waiting for complete and perfect transformation, to appreciate objects with history, even if they showed signs of use, to accept that organization is a continuous process, not a permanent state to be achieved all at once. This acceptance of imperfection brought a more human and welcoming quality to my home. It could be organized without being sterile. It could be calm without being impersonal. It could reflect care without requiring constant perfection. One of the deepest principles I learned was the idea that the objects around us should not only be useful or beautiful, but should also hold meaning. They should tell our story, reflect our values, and support the life we wish to live. I began to choose more carefully what I kept around me. It was no longer enough for something to be functional or aesthetically pleasing. It needed to resonate in some way with who I was or who I wished to become. The old sofa I inherited from my grandmother, even though it wasn't the most modern, told stories of family gatherings and remained in the living room. The collection of books that genuinely impacted my worldview gained a prominent place on the shelf. The tea set I used to host close friends for deep conversations was kept easily accessible. On the other hand, items that represented values I no longer identified with were gently removed. The giant TV that dominated the living room and was rarely turned on. The excessive amount of makeup products that reinforced an idea of beauty I no longer agreed with. The dozens of trinkets collected from trips, bought more on impulse than from any real connection. This conscious curation transformed my home into a space that truly represented me. Each object told a part of my story or supported the type of life I wanted to live. Nothing was there by chance or inertia. An unexpected discovery in this journey was realizing how deeply rooted our consumption habits are in our emotions. Often, we buy not because we need something, but because we are sad, anxious, insecure, or bored. The purchase temporarily fills a void, only to leave it even deeper once the initial excitement wears off. I began to observe my own patterns. I noticed how I tended to shop online after a tough day at work, how I felt drawn to sales, even for items I didn't need, how I often used treating myself as an excuse to acquire more things. By recognizing these patterns, I was able to develop healthier ways to cope with my emotions. A walk outdoors instead of a shopping spree, a conversation with a friend instead of a new object, a moment of quiet reflection instead of the temporary distraction of a new purchase. This emotional awareness became a powerful tool for maintaining balance in my home and my life. It was no longer about constantly fighting against the urge to accumulate, but about understanding its roots and transforming it. Over time, I realized that true organization isn't about having less, but about making space for what really matters. It's not deprivation, but freedom. It's not rigidity, but intentional fluidity. Each item removed opened up not just physical space, but mental and emotional room for more meaningful experiences. A less cluttered bedroom allowed for deeper, more restorative sleep. An organized kitchen inspired healthy home-cooked meals. A living room with space for movement invited friends for meaningful gatherings. A desk free of piled-up papers stimulated creativity and focus. The physical transformation of the space reflected and simultaneously catalyzed an inner transformation. External clarity promoted internal clarity. Visible order inspired mental order. The simplicity of the environment fostered simplicity of purpose. Another fascinating aspect of organization, inspired by Japanese philosophy, is the attention to nature's rhythms. There's a profound appreciation for the seasonal changes and how they affect our spaces and routines. I began adapting my home to the seasons. In winter, I introduced more cozy textures, rearranged the furniture to create more intimate conversation areas, and added soft lighting for the shorter days. In spring, I opened up to natural light, incorporated elements from nature that were awakening, and relieved the space of extra layers. These small adaptations created harmony between the indoor environment and the outside world. The home breathed along with the seasons, becoming a living organism rather than a static space. I also applied this sensitivity to daily rhythms. In the morning, the house opened up, curtains drawn back, windows opened to fresh air, clean surfaces for a fresh start. In the evening, the environment settled down. Lights softened, cozy gathering areas were created, and gentle preparation for rest began. These rhythms brought a nearly ceremonial quality to the days. Small rituals of opening and closing marked the transitions and brought awareness to moments that had previously gone unnoticed. One of the most powerful lessons was understanding the difference between superficial tidying and deep organization. Before, my efforts focused on hiding the mess, shoving things into closets, cramming items into boxes, creating the appearance of order without addressing the real cause of the clutter. True organization, I learned, begins long before the physical tidying up. It starts with clarity about what we truly want and need. It begins with conscious decisions about what we allow into our lives. It starts with systems that support our actual values and routines, not idealized ones. With this understanding, I stopped seeking quick fixes and miracle organization products. I didn't need more boxes, dividers, or fancy storage systems. What I really needed was fewer things to organize and more awareness of how I interacted with my space. This shift in perspective was liberating. Organization ceased to be a Herculean and endless task and became a natural flow, almost effortless, sustained by conscious daily choices. Another valuable concept was realizing that the spaces in our home are not only functional, but also emotional. Each environment has the power to evoke specific mental states, support certain activities, and nurture particular aspects of our well-being. With this awareness, I began to design each space intentionally. My bedroom became a sanctuary dedicated exclusively to rest and intimacy. Free of electronics, work, or distractions, the living room was designed to promote connection. Comfortable seating arranged to face one another, accessible books and games, and an absence of dominant screens. A small corner of the house has been transformed into a contemplation area. A comfortable chair, a view of the garden, some inspiring books, a space to simply be. The kitchen has been organized to make food preparation a pleasurable experience rather than a stressful chore. These intentional spaces supported different aspects of life, creating an environment that nurtured holistically. The house became more than just a place to store things. It turned into a living ecosystem that supported well-being, relationships, personal growth, and inner peace. One of the most surprising discoveries on this journey was realizing how my relationship with objects reflected my relationships with people. The difficulty in letting go of things often mirrored challenges in setting healthy boundaries. The urge to please others by accumulating their gifts reflected similar patterns in social interactions. By learning to say no respectfully to objects that no longer served me, I also developed the ability to establish clearer boundaries in my relationships. By creating intentional physical space, I also created emotional space for more authentic and meaningful connections. A less cluttered home naturally invited real presence. Without the constant distraction of objects, conversations became deeper. Without the need to impress with possessions, gatherings became more genuine. With less time spent organizing excess, there was more availability to truly be with loved ones. Throughout this transformation, I also discovered the importance of being kind to myself in the process. Real change doesn't happen overnight. There are setbacks, moments of doubt, periods of seeming regression, and all of that is part of the journey. I've learned to celebrate small victories instead of focusing solely on the final goal, the organized drawer, the consistently maintained 5-minute routine, the impulsive purchase avoided. Each small step was a movement in the right direction and deserved recognition. I've also learned not to compare myself to idealized images of perfect organization. My home didn't need to look like photos from magazines or social media profiles. It needed to work for my real life, with all its complexities and quirks. It needed to support my well-being and that of the people I love, rather than impressing occasional visitors. This kindness to myself has brought sustainability to the changes. Instead of cycles of intense effort, followed by frustrated quitting, I established a steady and compassionate pace of gradual evolution. Today, when I look at my home, I see much more than an organized space. I see a reflection of clarified values, conscious choices, and a life lived with intention. I see an environment that supports who I am and who I wish to become. The journey is far from over. Organization, like life, is an ongoing process of growth and refinement. There will always be new challenges, new areas to simplify, new understandings to integrate. But the foundation is set, awareness has been awakened, the path has been discovered, and each step in that direction brings not only a more organized home, but a fuller, more present life, aligned with what truly matters. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that true organization isn't about perfection, but about intention. It's not about following rigid rules, but about creating a space that breathes with us, that grows with us, that supports us on our unique journey. A space that, at the end of the day, when we close the door and allow ourselves to rest, welcomes us with the quiet assurance that we are exactly where we are meant to be. Home, not just in the physical sense, but in the deeper and truer sense of the word.